Well, today we're back on prophets and prophecy. Now, last broadcast, we discussed some things that were provocative and things that actually caused some people to go back and read their Bible again. And that's a good thing. Anytime I can provoke you to get back in the Word of God, that means I'm doing my job. And it also means that you're going to be blessed because of it. So today we're going into a little bit deeper subject, and we're going to call it the signs of the times. Now, that is not a cliche. It's not something that we just pulled out of our hat. It's what God has been dealing with me about and many prophets across the world. You see, the world has always asked, the church has always been inquisitive. What is the day we're living in? Lord, when are you coming? What is expected of us? How do we go from here to the next level? Well, I'm going to tell you in the words of Jesus. In Matthew 16, whenever he was talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. You see, it wasn't just the disciples that came to Jesus. It was the religious world. It was the power, the political power that be in that day in the church world that came to him, some for instruction and others trying to trick him up. But this is what Matthew 16 says. And the Pharisees also with the Sadducees came and desired him that he would show them a sign. In other words, they were trying to trip him up. Now, give us something that we will either know you are or you aren't, but we don't think you are, or we wouldn't be asking these questions. And he answered and said unto them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites! You can discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. A wicked and an adulterous generation seeketh a sign, and there shall be no sign given unto it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and departed. Now, you say, what did he say? He looked at them and said, you can tell the weather. You can forecast whether to go out on the sea and go fishing. You can look at the sky in the morning. You can look at the sky in the evening and know what the weather's going to be. But you cannot see that which is happening around you. And for that, he said, I call you a hypocrite because you don't study the word, you read the word. And there is a difference there. And he said, and it will be like it was in the days of Jonah. What was the days of Jonah? He was fearful, but he was obedient. Now, being afraid is not a bad thing as long as you use it for your betterment. But being afraid and running from the truth is a different matter. Now, we live in a world today where people want to quote scripture, they want to quote history, they want to talk about things they've seen. In the world of politics, we see them gathering information and skewing it and slanting it. Now, when we were teaching in public or private school, they call that slanted news. In other words, it started from a point that had some truth to it, but by the time you finished, it was non-recognizable. Well, the church is doing that. The world is doing that. Politics. Oh my God. To say that a politician is telling the truth is almost a lie itself. Why? Because they are trying to move in disobedience. They are trying to move in their own will. When Jonah said, no, Lord, I'm not going to Nineveh, they'll kill me. I'd rather do anything than go to Nineveh. I'd rather do anything than tell the truth. I'd rather do anything and stand in front of your people and tell them, thus saith the Lord, out of fear that they wouldn't believe me. And God said, you'd rather do anything? All right. I've got a little something here for you. Let's see how you handle that. And the Bible said God prepared a well. Now, this was not a species unto itself. God took a well and prepared him different than any other well that had ever been born. And he put him in the sea next to the boat that Jonah was riding in. And we all know the story of Jonah and the well. I wouldn't want to be there. I'm a little claustrophobic. I don't like the smell of dead fish. I think vomit turns me off. But Jonah had to realize that obeying God was not as egregious as he thought it was. Actually, being obedient to him was his salvation. When he finally said, Lord, I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll talk to anybody. Just get me out of this well. Well, sometimes the church feels that way. Lord, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll go wherever you want me to go, but I can't hardly stand what's going on in my nation. I can't stand what's going on in my state. It's intolerable for me to see what's happening to my church. Well, there are things that are worse than being inconvenienced. Jonah found that out. But Jesus said that one of the signs of the last days would be disobedient, intolerance, frustration. I told somebody the other day what America is feeling right now, this frustration, this ebb tide of anger that's sweeping through our nation, this civil unrest. They call it civil disobedience, but it's civil warfare. We are feeling the anger of a frustrated nation because we are like a little child. We're like a little child in the fact that when nobody's in charge, children get anxious. And when they get anxious, they act out. We don't have strong leadership anymore. We don't have anybody at the helm. Whoever's flying this ship is blindfolded. The Oval Office is confused. And America feels it right down to its roots. Even our children feel it. They see that we're frustrated. They see that we're angry. They see that we're anxious. What is the signs of the times? It'll be like Jonah when you know what to do, but you don't want to do it because the price may be too big. You cannot tell me that a Christian does not know what he's supposed to be doing right now. You say, well, Brother Hagin, nobody told me. Yeah, they did. They said, pray without ceasing. Seek the will of God. Find that perfect place in him where there's peace and tranquility. But how do we get there? Jesus said, if you cannot see the signs of the times, I can't help you because you're in hypocrisy. It's not that the signs are not there. It's just that people choose not to look. Now, what is everybody looking for? What are they looking for direction in? Well, number one, we're looking for political direction. I mean, who's in charge? Are the inmates in charge of the asylum? Where do we go from here? Politically, we have no direction. Politically, we have no leadership. We're looking for a political answer to a spiritual and physical problem. Then we have our finance, and everybody's scared to death, and I don't blame you. I have bankers that are sending word to me, we're really not going to do anything with the money. Well, that's a lie. That's a lie. Biden has already signed an executive order going on 3 weeks now that gives the bank permission to use your 401k and your savings in case they get in financial difficulties. They will use your money to bail them out, and they will give you, according to the document that he signed, the executive order says they can replace your cash with shares in the bank. If they're going under and they're going bankrupt, they can use your money, and the government said all they have to do is give you shares at a bankrupt bank, a failed entity, and they make you partners with them in their failure. Does it sound fair? No, but it's got to happen. There's got to be an overthrow of the fiat currency that we are operating under today, and we've taught on that for a long time, and I won't beat that dog to death, but I will tell you this. If you have cash, I would find something more substantial. You see, there's a difference between currency and money. Really? Currency is a printed document that is given to you in replace of something that you value. Now, whether that value be your skill, your labor, your ability to create and manufacture, or whether it be that which is owed to you for a debt that you've sold property, you've sold a car, you've sold a house, they give you currency. Money has its own value. Currency has a flexible value. Currency is a fiat currency. It's a fiat system, which means it can be changed or dwarfed by the men in charge. Well, hang on, because we're going to get there. But America feels that frustration right now. Will my money be any good? Will my 401k be good? Will my savings be there when I need it? How can I trust a bank who has carte blanche, the authority to go in and change everything I've got to an IOU or to a share in a failed entity? And we feel that fear and frustration. We also are wondering what's going to happen with our personal safety. If things get bad and we see stores that are suddenly devoid of food and substance, like we saw with the COVID-19 quarantine scare, when you had to go to Walmart and you had to go to Kmart, you had to go to Costco and you had to go to Target, and you saw empty shelves where bread should be, you saw empty racks where eggs should be, you saw canned goods that were not being replaced. And it suddenly dawned on you, what would I do if this store closed? What would you do if the drugstore closed? What about my personal safety? We all have those nagging fears because right now this administration is taking us headlong on a ride to destruction. We have more debt than we've ever had, and they're making it by the trillions. Every bill they pass now is not a 10 billion or 20 billion. It's a 1 trillion, it's a 2 trillion. There's more money right now, there is more currency being distributed right now that says the USA will pay the value of this currency than we have the ability to repay. You know, I was a little kid one time and I wanted something, and my mother said, I can't afford it right now. And I went and got the checkbook and I brought it to her. I said, Mom, surely you could afford it. Look, there's checks left here. We got plenty of checks. Well, that became a joke at our house. I thought if we had checks, we had money. That sounds to me like the Congress, doesn't it? If we have the Federal Reserve, we can have money. If we tell them we need more currency, they just put it on the computer and send it to us. They don't even bother to print it anymore. But there are signs out there that are telling us that this too must come to pass. But where do we stand chronologically in the way that things are right now? Well, here's the thing. There are signs all around us, but there's a game of smoke and mirrors being played by the media. And they're telling us, don't look there, look here. Don't look over there, look over here. And as we twirl around following the mystic bouncing ball that the media has bounced in front of us, they're propagating lies and false news to keep you from seeing the real facts. And biblically, we're going to look at the facts today. The Bible tells us that there are certain things that must come to pass. That Ezekiel 37 and 38 talk about it in detail. One of them is the Valley of Dry Bones prophecy, when he said he'll cause these bones to live again and call them from the four corners of the earth where they have been scattered and make a nation once again out of his people. But something had to happen as a catalyst. You see, the Middle East and Jerusalem, Israel and all the other Middle Eastern countries, they are the pinpoint, the pivot point, if you please, of prophecy. And November the 6th, 2017, our president, President Trump, made a statement to the whole world. He did something that the last four presidents had not done. He followed through with a commitment to make Israel not only a bright and shining star in the Middle East, to give her a bastion of safety and put walls round about her that could not be penetrated. He also made Jerusalem once again the focal point of Israel by moving the embassy there and recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now that was prophesied, like I said, in Ezekiel 37. And when this action started, when President Trump made that commitment, when President Trump put that plaque on that wall, when he built that building and dedicated it in Jerusalem, he started a march toward the end time and may not have even realized it. You see, what happened is he opened the door and stepped over the threshold on the path to the day of sorrows. Now, remember, I told you that tribulation is another word for trouble. The day of sorrows is the first part of what we are going to know as the troubled times or the times of tribulation. The great tribulation starts when the abomination of desolation stands in the temple and said he is God and that men should worship him and they should follow him. And we hadn't got there yet, but there is a prelude to that. We've talked about the planks of the platform that the Antichrist will use to bring the Antichrist will use. Listen to me now. The Antichrist will use to bring the world to focus on him. Now, he said in the days of trouble, which is the beginning of the days of sorrow, will be wars and rumors of wars. We'll see desolation in places. We'll see famine. We'll see people that are dying. We'll see mysterious diseases and pestilence. All of these things happen before the abomination of desolation presents himself. Now, somebody said, is that the judgments of God? No, that is Satan trying his best to destroy the church. Because when the Antichrist comes on the scene, the first thing he's going to do after declaring that he is God is wage war with the saints. But what brings us to that point? How do we get from here to the abomination of desolation being made known? Well, things have got to happen. You know, at the beginning of the day of sorrows, we're going to be focusing on prophecy if we're wise. But remember what I told you about the media? They keep our attention diverted. I believe that is a satanic plot. I believe they are operated by Luciferian families that know that they can keep the church distracted. They will not see what's going on. We know that the Middle East has always been that focal point I spoke of, that pivotal point in prophetic timetables. After World War II, when the world was decimated and everybody was sorrowful and death on every hand, the Jews had just come through the Holocaust. 6 million plus had been slaughtered in the labor camps. Germany had tried to annihilate Jewish blood. But in that turmoil, they were brought together in one mind and one accord and decided the only way to make sure that it never happened again was to have a nation dedicated to their faith, their people, and for the protection of their lineage. So in 1947, they began the Great Exodus to what they call Palestine then. But they called it home because it was Jerusalem. And as the Jews began to gather, the UN finally said, we've got to do something here for reparation for what the Jews have been through. So they gave them a plot of ground, Jerusalem to be shared by the Palestinians and the Israelis, and they called it Israel. It wasn't until November 1948 that Jews got the greatest thrill of their life. They were recognized as an independent nation, no longer under control of the British, no longer under control of the UN, no longer dependent on anybody else. They could have their own nation, do their own thing. But there was still something missing. There was still that divided concept that Palestine and Israel shared Jerusalem. That has been going on for years. There have been debates, there have been treaties trying to divide it up, the old city, the new city, the Arab city, the Israeli city. Finally, when President Trump, November the 6th, 2017, declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel, did they feel a victory had been won. But you see, that was not a new thing biblically, because 2,700 years ago, Ezekiel prophesied that this would happen. He saw Israel rising out of a valley of dry bones. He saw Jerusalem being the star that shone above all others. And he called it the beginning of tribulation. It was the time for Israel to be pulled together in preparation for the return of the king. And Israel began to build a nation that every country in the world, including the U.S. and Russia, is fearful of. We'll get into that a little later. But Israel made its mark in the world, and it proclaimed its independence and became a nation. Now, in order to establish a timeline on where we are and where we're going, I want you to look at the prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah as they described other events that would happen in the Middle East. And that coincides with the birth of Israel. To do that, you have to look a little further to the east. You have to look a little further away from Jerusalem to Syria. Now, Syria borders Israel. And Damascus has been the center point of Syria for decades, in fact, centuries. For almost 5,000 years, Damascus was the center point of Syria. That's where all the commerce in the Middle East went through. It was the trade route from the east to the west. Everybody went to Damascus to trade their gold. Everybody went to Damascus to buy linen. Everybody went to Damascus to buy precious goods. It was the hub of the Middle East. You might say it was the New York City of the Middle East. But what we see going on in prophecy, Isaiah 17 said, there will be a day when Damascus will be in heaps and ruins, and its men will be killed in the street. Jeremiah 48 said it will be feeble, and fear and death will come upon it, and it will be destroyed, not only in the eyes of man, but in the eyes of God. Consequently, Damascus is a pivotal point. You hear on the news almost daily, but you have to listen close because the media did not want you to know this. Syria is under siege right now. They are in a civil war. That civil war started in 2011. It started whenever their leader, Bashar al-Assad, decided that he wanted total control, and he was going to have total control, and the rebels rose up against him. Now, this fulfilled another prophecy. Ezekiel 38 said, therefore, thou son of man, prophesy against Gog, and say, thus saith the Lord, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And I will turn thee back and leave a sixth part of thee, and cause those that come up from the north parts, and I will bring thee unto the mountains of Israel, and I will smite thy bow. And he goes on talking about what's going to happen to the allies of Syria. Now, how did that come about? You jumped from Syria being in a civil war to Gog and Magog, which we all know is Russia. How did we get there so quickly? Very simple. In 2011, whenever the leader of Syria began to fight the rebels that were trying to throw him out of office, Bashar al-Assad was losing. In 2015, he had almost lost the civil war. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. The UN speaks out against his atrocities. The world is looking at him through darkened eyes. And he realized he was failing and was going to fall. So he made a pact with Russia. And this is where you get Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog are the people talked about that are north of the Caspian Sea that come down to the border of Israel to fight in the Middle East. Now, they did something that's never been done before. Whenever Bashar al-Assad made the pact with Russia, it fulfilled a prophecy that we find in the latter part of the 38th chapter of Ezekiel, when he said that the people of Magog inhabited the land north of the Caspian Sea, which was called Rush, and today we call it Russia. And they came to Syria, to the border of Israel, and made allies with Persia, which is Iran, with Put, which is Libya, with Cush, which is now Egypt, and Gomar and Togarmah, which is Turkey. Now, how do you know it's Turkey? Well, the historian Flavius Josephus spoke of these people as the inhabitants of the land of Gomer and Togarmah, or what we now know as Turkey. And Russia came in for the first time in history. Never before has it happened. They rush to Syrians' aid and realize that they need help, so they ally themselves with Iran, Libya, Egypt, and Turkey. Now, Turkey was a member of NATO, a very strong member of NATO. They had pledged in the North Atlantic Treaty Association to protect those countries that they were in league with and to do war with anyone that came against the countries they were in league with, until they realized that the land that they had wanted just south of Turkey, close to Pakistan, was available. So they joined with Russia and Iran and Persia and Egypt. And they made a treaty. They will fight in Syria. They will fight to free Syria, because that one location next to Israel gives them a launching pad to do war in the Middle East. And I don't mean a skirmish. I don't mean 3 or 4 planes and an airstrike. I don't mean 1,000 troops rushing across the border and taking a prisoner. They will do war in the Middle East. And when you see this, the Bible said you're going to know that we are moving closer and closer and closer to what I call the days of sorrow. How is that? Because they are going after Israel. That's the only reason that Russia and Turkey made an ally with Syria. It borders Israel, and they hate Israel. Now, one reason that Russia wants it is because they found new oil deposits just offshore of Israel, and they're drilling right now, the Zion Petroleum Company, I think it's called. I knew this 20 years ago. I was with a prophet one time, and he said, "Do you think Israel has oil?" I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "You're right. But they won't find it until we get to the days of sorrow." They have found the largest deposits in the Middle East, in the offshore waters owned and patrolled by Israel. The fight there is not just to take an ancient city. The fight there is for the oil and the wealth that it brings. Also, there's a blood feud between Iran and Syria and Israel. Right now, Israel is calling for the assassination of Assad. He's calling that anyone that will kill him, anyone that will destroy him, will be remunerated very kindly by Israel. They will be rewarded. But also, we've got another battle going on. You see, the Arabs claim Jerusalem as their holy city. And the cry and the battle cry on the battlefield right now with Iran, as well as Syria and Egypt, is kill the infidel, kill those that take our land, kill those that desecrate our holy places. Not only is it a religious war, but it is a financial war. And it's being waged as we speak. And yet the Bible keeps screaming, when you see this, know that the days of sorrow are at hand. You know, we're so interested and worried about what happened about it in a trial in Minnesota. We're so interested about why we have barbed wire and fences strung up in the capital of the United States of America. We're more interested in how many people sit on the Supreme Court or whether or not D.C. is going to become a state than we are in taking control of our own destiny and realizing as a church, as a body, as Christians, the signs of the times are there. You know, there's one thing more that has to be fulfilled. And this is what the Bible said. Ezekiel speaking. Damascus is waxed feeble. Jeremiah 49:24. Damascus is waxed feeble and turneth herself to flee, and fear hath seized on her. Anguish and sorrows have taken her, as a woman in travail. How is the city of praise not left, the city of their glory? Therefore her young men shall fall in her streets, and all the men of war shall be cut off in that day. And the Lord said, I will kindle a fire in the walls of Damascus, and it shall consume the palaces of Ben-Hadad. Now, if you're not following closely what's happening in the Middle East, let me bring you up to date before we close. Ben-Hadad is not a city, but it's a biblical name for the ruler of Aram Damascus. Armam, is the land located in the region of Syria called Aleppo. Sound familiar? You might have heard it just a little bit on the news. The city of Aleppo is where Ben-Hadad palaces would rule. Syria has retaken Aleppo. They've reoccupied that part of the land. And they have points and palaces built there that they're running the armies out of that region. The Bible said, when you see the consumption of the palaces of Ben-Hadad. What is Ben-Hadad? That is the leader of Syria. Taking over all the land that they used to own, going back and resetting the boundaries. But they're establishing once again the perimeter of Syria. He said, when you see that and you see their palaces ablaze, take heed, because they must be destroyed. Why does Damascus have to be destroyed? Because it has been the pinnacle of mockery, paralleling what God had meant for Jerusalem to be. And the Arabs made Damascus that parallel, and they made that their trophy city. And right now you have Israel, the United States, you have Saudi Arabia gathering together to try to protect the peace of the Middle East. But you've got Russia leading the charge with Iran and with Turkey, with Egypt, Iraq, trying to overthrow Israel. Now, what's going to happen when that battle comes about? Well, we'll talk about that probably next week. But you see, here's what we've got to do. We've got to understand the spirit of the day. Israel is screaming to the world, anybody who assassinates Bashar al-Assad, I will give them wealth. I will give them honor. They've asked the United States to send in drones. Even this week, they started their own bombing of places in Syria, or continued bombing places in Syria. Iran has just made the statement to the world, thumbing their nose at America, we will start enriching uranium at 60% higher than we've ever done, which is weapons grade, which is where bombs come from. The Middle East was afraid of Donald Trump. They are not afraid of Biden. He has been one catastrophe after another. He has created one dilemma after another. We saw that China sit there and thumbed their nose at him and challenged him and sneered at our representative. They wouldn't have done that before. America is sliding down the pedestal. We are losing our prominent position. No longer are we the leaders in finance and military. Our dollar is struggling to stay afloat. Our military is being sliced in pieces emotionally by the administration that we have. They've got men that are in the military right now that are looking for what they call traitors and corruptors, which means that they're not Democrat, that they have a more conservative view. And they're mustering them out of our military, leaving behind a liberal set of officers where anything goes as long as I don't lose my pension or my commission. There was an oath given to every man that ever went in the military. I pledge my life to protect America from all enemies, both foreign and domestic. They are destroying that creed by what they are doing now in the disguise of leadership. America, we're sliding down off the pedestal, but it's all part of prophecy. Next time, I'll talk to you about the action that will spark World War III and where America is in prophecy. Don't miss it. It might shock you, but it will certainly be the truth, and it will be biblical from start to finish. Now, those of you that support us, if you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, we've changed the domain name on our website just a little. You can get to our website now by just typing in jphim.org. That's jphim.org. We need your help. We covet your prayers. We're in this together. Help us take this message far. We've got to go far. God bless you. God bless your family. And God bless America.